salute you. So you're watching the Get Busy Living podcast. It's a little late at night, so hopefully you're still up and you haven't gone to sleep yet. But I wanted to thank Dante Meneguz. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, that's right, mate.
So thank you, Dante, for coming on and being on the podcast, the Get Busy Living podcast, and appreciate your time. And I'm looking forward to hearing the gold nuggets of information that you've got. So yeah, appreciate your time, mate.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for that. Appreciate it, Scott.
So I'll start off with my usual question, and that is, what gets you out of bed every morning, Dante?
Yeah, I mean, this was a good question. I saw the question come up earlier, and I was like, okay, what actually really makes me, drive myself and make me, really want to, start the day, and what makes me happy, really. And for me, for a long time, it was accounting. Sadly enough, it's a really sad view on life, and I actually changed the way I thought after I moved across into sales. But to be honest, a lot of it is to do with just me wanting to really be the best version of myself for my children. I've got 4 children myself, 2 of which are adults. One's 20, one's 18. But for a long part of my life, it was all about making sure that I'm the best role model and best version of myself for them, especially around health. I think kids learn a lot from not what you say, but what you actually do. And so setting a good example is very important. So for me, it was all about making sure that I have enough sleep, but also have the right attitude in the morning. So that's very important for me, having the right attitude, then also structuring my day, and also being able to be very productive as well. And so that means having a good structure in terms of being very tight with timelines, being on time. That's very important, and that really shapes them for when they go into school, university, which my eldest daughter is at now, and then also for when they start careers, and both my daughters are working as well. And that's very important for them to have that drive, but also to make sure that they are setting themselves up for a good good start to the day, not being stressed out early on. Stress is one of the biggest problems, I think, for humans in terms of aging, as well as belly flat, and also for other things, health problems later on. So being structured, being smart around how you work is very important. And diet is a big thing that I believe in. Having a good big breakfast, not a protein-based breakfast is important. The other areas would be probably just work-wise for me. I want to succeed, and so I really map out my day the day before, and then I'm walking in basically to work. I know what I need to do in terms of my calendar. It's all structured, it's already planned in, and that really drives success for me to be able to then get those new wins. I do B2B sales in software, so that's very important that I am on time, but also I understand my prospects' needs and be able to then really present properly and meet their needs and pain points properly, and win that business.
So that leads me into the next question. Funny you should say that, because on your LinkedIn profile, your sales experience, you got 15 years of SaaS sales experience, 11 years in business accounting experience, equipment finance leaders and teams with best of breed finance tools. So you obviously you've got an accounting sales background. So I don't know, you can tell me which one did you get into first?
Yeah, so I actually started off wanting to pursue a real estate sales career path, and I started studying real estate and diploma in real estate, and then sort of just morphed into working in an office. Really needed a job. I got an opportunity, took that opportunity, and then for whatever reason, they saw a lot of potential in me in that college, and they gave me an opportunity to work in their college in accounts. The lady at the time that was working there, she wasn't putting in the effort, and she just wasn't turning up. So I was doing her job in half the time because I was doing part-time work in the afternoons. I was doing another role as well. So they offered me the role, and then I just sort of just went down that path of a rabbit hole of, okay, now I actually like accounting because that's what I'm doing. And then I studied accounting, got a diploma in accounting, did that part-time evenings. I did that 3 nights a week, plus also Saturdays, for quite a few years, while juggling 2 young children at the time and study and working full time at the same time. And then once I did that, I just, obviously progressed throughout my career into other roles within accounts and ended up being an accountant for a design firm. So there was a lot of things that I used to do, working with CFOs and reporting into the group, to boards, preparing board papers, P&Ls, all the boring stuff, right? Did that for 11 years. Got to a point where I was, okay, this is just never ending, right? Month ends never stop, and we're just doing all these transactions and we're reporting on the history, and it's not really proactive. You're not really driving business success, right? You are making key decisions from that information, but you're not actually contributing to the bottom line. And that's what I wanted to do. So at the time, I was working with a software company that were using their accounting software, and there was an opening there. And the lady that I used to work with that used to come in and help us out with consultancy, she turned around and said to me, well, I think you're the right person. You're a people person. You feel like you're not really an accounting boring person, as cliche that is. And I thought, okay, well, let's give this a shot. I'm all about trying new things, but also moving up and pushing myself into exciting new things. And I like talking to people. And so I did an interview and they gave me a job. I was surprised. So I made a switch 11 years into my career into software, and I had no idea how to sell. So from there, when I started this new company, the global president, or the owner of the software company that was based in the UK, he gave me this sort of ultimatum: if you get a new client in the next 3 months, you get to go to the UK. I was like, okay, great, get to go to the UK, get to get a trip that's paid for by work, but also see the world. Who doesn't want that? The only catch was, yeah, 100%. Like, you just want to do that, right? I mean, everyone's dream. And I was used to sitting behind a desk, hiding the payroll for information, processing people's pays. Everyone else is getting all the accolades, and I'm just here. So I jumped on that, but the only catch for me was he said that I needed to get a new customer in the first 3 months, and I had no sales experience. So I hustled, and I had some support, which was great, but I learned as much as I could. And our product and our software and also our business at the time wasn't a big company, and leads were hard to come by. So it was about refining the presentation, making sure it was polished. So I worked hard at that. So when an opportunity did come in, there was no doubt in their mind, and the sales process, but also the presentation, really nailed that customer to make sure that they were satisfied and it met their needs. So yeah, I got a new customer, Singapore based, which was great because then I got to meet the Singapore team. They flew out and they had a trip for themselves. We did a planning meeting, we did some training there as well. I ended up flying out to Singapore as well later on, which was great. But yeah, I went to the UK. It was wonderful. And then from there on, everything just sort of started growing for me. I had lots of trips to Europe, weekends away to different places. While I visited the UK office, like I said, I went to Asia quite a few times for clients in Asia, interstate travel in Australia. So I was handling the APEC region for that software company. Stayed there for 10.5 years, believe it or not. And at the time, I was like, okay, I just want to really just nail, the sales process and understand how to sell and just be able to present properly and, just to be the best version of myself. But I got to a point where there was no growth for me. And I'm a firm believer you need to be in a business that really, sticks by you, but also you see that you can grow with them and there's a career pathway. So I ended up leaving there after 2022. I remember the day because it was the time that everyone was resigning, just after COVID. We had this whole great resignation. Remember that whole great resignation period where everyone, out of being locked out of everything that we did in life, everyone was like, okay, we can return back to work. People were just like, okay, I want to find a new job because we need to find a work balance and life's too short, right? So I did the same. I started interviewing, did about 16 interviews in 2 weeks. And one big important thing was working with an Australian company. I wanted to work for an Aussie company, wanted to be directly involved with the development of the software, also directly involved with the team face to face. And I started interviewing. I got a few jobs. Actually, got some really high profile companies that wanted me to work for them. I declined one big one, and I ended up working for ProSpend, which I work for today. I've been there for just over 4 years now, and yeah, they're a great company. And for me, it's really working with the previous industry that I started my career, which was accounting. And I was working in accounting, and I worked with accountants and CFOs and business leaders day to day to streamline their processes. So what our software does, it's an expense but also AP automation tool. So it's about the AI machine learning to streamline that data entry point. So one of the big things that I used to do a lot in my previous roles was entering in information, right? Entering invoices, entering in customer receipts and payments. And it just takes a lot of time, and you can't really get to the important things and keep your finger on the pulse of the business. So we streamline all that information. Invoices get scanned through. We have virtual cards and different products as well. So it's basically giving back time, and time is money, as we say. So giving back time to people that are processing transactions. So get rid of those manual tasks. So for me, that was very important to give back to the community that gave me so much early on. So I really enjoy working with accountants and CFOs to really revolutionize and get rid of all that data entry and also the slow processing of approvals. So yeah, that's where I am today. So I meet with lots of people, and I think I'm quite successful in my role. I've been the #1 salesperson for many years now, and I do get to travel. I mean, I don't travel abroad as much, but that's more for leisure now these days, which is better actually because I have my own time for myself.
Wow. Okay. So, so you've been with ProSpend for a few years, and like you said, so tell us a bit about what they do. So you were saying that they help with processes.
Yeah, streamline those processes and automate the process.
Yes, and that's through AI, sorry, intervention. So, tell us a bit about that. So, is it like is it the balancing of the books, or is it
Yeah, so it's
helping the
it's a transactional information. So think of it this way: like you receive an invoice from your supplier. What's the first thing you do when you receive that invoice for zero? You have to enter into zero, right, or MIB.
yeah,
So it's you find the supplier, select the supplier, then you then go through and then enter in the invoice number, date, the invoice information, descriptions. So you having to do that is quite manual. That takes time. That's maybe a couple of minutes for one invoice. Let's say you've got 100 invoices, a couple of minutes, then potentially, if it's 3 minutes to enter an invoice and it's 100 invoices, you'll get 300 minutes, to process an invoice, or 300 invoices in a month. So
yeah,
we'll then, instead of you entering that in, you'll email it into ProSpend, and then we'll then scan that information in. So we'll link it to the right supplier, scan the line information, scan the header information around the invoice number, the due date, the date of the invoice. All that comes in, so you don't have to do anything. And then you just review the invoice, and then from there, you then have maybe approval workflows. So you're saying, okay, well, this invoice needs to go to this person in this department because they've got delegated authority, and then it routes it to where it needs to go based on your approval structures. So you're not having to then think about, okay, well, we need to then email that invoice off to this person, keep a track of who we've sent it to, because they might not send it back approved. And then that's manual as well. So the system shows all that, and it shows who's who we're waiting on in terms of approvals, and the system then also gives us reminders to those people that have approved invoices in different timeframes. So that's just one part of that. There's also fraud prevention as well. So one big problem with any sort of digital, or at the digital world in general, is that you get a lot of scammers out there. So what they tend to do is they tend to go through and intercept your emails, or fake or spoof emails are sent through to you to try and fool you to think that that's an invoice. It's something that you have to pay, and it might look exactly like an Officeworks or Bunnings invoice, a usual supplier that you have. But what we do is we validate that. So we look at the banking information on the invoice, we scan that, and then we compare that to the master record in your accounting software like Xero or MYB or NetSuite, and then flag it if it's different. So that's one of the checks. And then another check is around the average invoices. So you might get an invoice that's always $2,000 a month for cleaning for the office, or around that area, or whatever regular expense that you're getting monthly. We're then comparing the averages across the last 6 invoices. So then you're preventing any sort of out of the ordinary invoices that come through. So there's all these checks in place. The other areas that we do is around expenses for credit cards. One big problem with businesses these days is, you give your employee a company credit card, they have that company credit card, and a big thing is that the receipts, justify that expense. Making it easy for the employee, so they're not having to then, hold those receipts in maybe a folder on their laptop, or in their gallery, a folder on their device, or having to hold them in their wallet back in days gone by, which people still do. Those printed receipts are still very common because people give receipts out these days for credit card expenses. So having a mobile phone app to take photos of those receipts, where we're scanning that receipt information, don't need to key in the amounts or the GST or the supplier name. The system does that for them, and then once we want to put through that credit card statement, instead of them emailing it through, we'll get a feed directly from the bank into our platform. So then there's a feed that comes through, builds that statement, they take a photo, it matches it automatically to the right transaction, all the coding, all the information comes through in the receipt, and then it just makes that reconciliation process really, really streamlined. So giving back time is very important for our platform, and these are mundane tasks, but these are simple tasks, but they're time-consuming tasks. So it's all about making it simple.
So let me get this straight. So you're basically bypassing the point of sale. You're getting the information directly from the bank, and then you're putting it in the software.
Exactly. And that's the way it is, right? The humans make errors all the time. You're relying on a person visually to check that information on a day-to-day, right? So they're looking at what is on that invoice and then keying it in. And if they're not good at typing, or if they're tired or whatever, we're humans. But you're getting it from the source directly in, one point of entry. That data's there already, and it's just a review process. And then we can have even like some checks around that, around, okay, well, we've usually code this to a general ledger code of this. The finance team always put it to this. AI will suggest that this is the coding it should be. Those types of things.
So I was going to say, I get emails all the time. You should pay this invoice, and the way I figure it out is, like if it's from MyGov or Officeworks, it'll have Officework at or MyGov at. It won't have Gmail at the end of it.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
That's fair. That's fair to say. I mean, that's one way to do a check, but you're having to visually check that. But there is ways around
that's
that.
Right,
they are getting smart. They can substitute different languages, different characters that look like the same letters as our alphabet from the English language. There are certain characters in different languages that look exactly like 0 or O. And they just need to change one thing. And you won't know.
I've heard that. I've had someone else on the cybersecurity. That's what they do. That's all they do.
Yeah.
And
So that's important. So it's different data points to validate around what is actually real and what's not. And sometimes it's about, especially around, let's say you wanted to put a supplier on, and you might get a new invoice from a supplier or a new contract. You need to call them up. Sometimes it's better just to get on the phone to speak to a person. I think this is a problem these days. People tend to rely on data and what they see as opposed to interacting with people face to face or on the phone to really validate that. So I think getting on the phone sometimes is also better.
yeah, absolutely. And, I've got a client at the moment. He, he's in his 70s. He's not a spring chicken, and you know, he's taking a lot of medication, so he's not always mentis compass. He's not. He doesn't always have his faculties, and yeah, he just got ripped off through a phone call. And so
it happens to elderly people all the time. Yeah, you're right.
He thought it was Telstra. He thought he was certain it was Telstra, and of course he's given over his details, and they've just cleaned his accounts out. So
and that's
the banks are right. The banks are going to say, "Well, you've given them permission."
That's right. It's true,
but it's fraud. They're saying that there's something that they weren't.
Yeah. I mean, we could go down this rabbit hole, right? Like, there's a lot of things. Like, I look at how, I work in software, and software is everywhere around us. We're using software right now just to be here. And one of the big things is, around privacy. You talk about how people can sign up to different apps and different platforms and different, ways to work or play, and people don't read things. Blows my mind. If you look at the fine print, I'm sure the audience would relate to this, and yourself as well. When you are, on online looking at maybe some shoes or whatever, or motorbike or something you like, next minute you bring up your social media app or something, and next minute you see ads being fed to you around that. Like, what? They're tracking me. They're stalking me. And that's the truth. They are. And the reason why they're doing that is because you've allowed consent on that app to do that. You have allowed microphone access. You've allowed, cookies, which says they can follow you. So what are they breaching, really? They're not really breaching anything because you've consented to it, because you've said yes.
Yep. Yeah, well, I don't know how many times the banks have sent me, every time I open up the bank app, it's like, every time I might open it up every few days, and there's always the next, what the hell? I'm agreeing to something again.
And you have to verify yourself. Yeah.
But the problem I have with that is there's no way you can't open the app without agreeing to which is coercion.
I know. It's basically putting you in a very tough position, right? You want to be able to access your funds. So you have to play the rules. You do.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound right at all.
It doesn't. And that's the thing, right? What alternative do you have? Either you just go completely.
You got to find.
Yeah, you just go somewhere else, and they're the same. They're just all as bad as each other. So that's the digital landscape that we live in. Otherwise, you just go back to cash.
Yep. Or people are going to crypto. It's all
crypto. You can do that. And then they have their own challenges there. There's lots of fraud that occurs in that space too, with these bogus coins and stuff. So you have to be very educated around that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you were saying before about discipline, and you wanted to show that your kids, you teach them through actions. Well, tell us about what you did before you became an accountant. Did you do anything prior to that?
Yeah. I used to be very. Part of my journey in life was my father was a very big influence on me early on. He did a lot of distance running, so he got me into running, and he was always pushing me every morning, wake up, let's go for an 8K run. That was just a normal routine that we had. It was just part of life. It was like brushing my teeth in the morning. And so I'd be waking up at 6:30 in the morning, going for a run before school. The bus would leave around 7:20 in the morning. So we'd have to get a scoot on. Didn't matter if it was middle of winter, we'd go for a run, and it was always on the side of the road. I did that for a long time. I didn't like distance running. I was never a distance runner. But that also allowed me to then understand what I did like. So then when I was probably around 11 years old, as you do, like my parents were my biggest fan. We used to have sporting carnivals. I grew up in regional New South Wales, so I grew up in Grafton, which is probably around 700 kilometres from Sydney, and we were around 70 k's west of Grafton, so quite remote. Our closest primary school was an Aboriginal primary school, and me being not Aboriginal, I wasn't allowed to go there, so we used to go to the white people's school. And from there, we used to have running athletics carnivals, as all schools do now, every day or every year. And my parents would always show up to see me run. I wasn't very good when I was really young, second, third, that type of thing. But I hit puberty at a very young age. Hit puberty when I was in end of year 5. I was basically shaving my goatee when I was in year 6. And so then from there, I became quite quick. And then my dad was like, okay, well, let's take you somewhere. And so then he started coaching me, sprinting. We used to do a lot of training after school and stuff. And I got really good. I ended up going to state. Didn't place. I ended up coming 7th a lot, but I used to win my school 100 meters, 200 meters, 400 meters by considerable margins. And then people noticed. And then I ended up going. My dad was like, okay, well, we need to get some proper coaching. So then I started Livin Athletics, and then did well there. And school CHS did well there too. Won, 400 meters was my main event, 400, 200 meters, and competed for New South Wales in under 13s, and then also from that event, like when I went for Livin Athletics, the state championships, I ended up winning the 400 meters and came, I think, 3rd in the 400 meters, 200 meters. And at the time, they used to have a state team. I think they still do it. So under 13s, under 15s. And it was a selective for the state. They selected me for the Australian Championships. So then I ended up running for the Australian Championships for the New South Wales team. And this was pre-Olympics. So they were still constructing the Olympic Stadium. And so I would run at the warm-up track, and that was the normal place that athletic carnivals would be. And then this year it was actually in 1996, it was in Sydney. So they used to rotate different cities, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, and it was in Sydney. So I ran at the Australian Championships, did the 400 meters, ended up coming 7th, I think 7th or 6th. And then the 200 meters, I think I ended up coming 5th. And then I was part of the 4x100 meter relay team for the under 13 boys, and we ended up winning that championship, which was great. So I got a gold medal in my trophy cabinet, and we ended up breaking the Australian record as well, which was amazing.
Wow.
So athletics was big for me. And then I was part of an academy sport as well for North Coast Academy, had my own coach, did that for many years. Got to a point where kids used to walk up to me and say, are you going to the Olympics? When are you going to be selected? Stuff like that. That wasn't really what I wanted to do. I got to an age where I was 16, 15, and I felt like there was more to life. I dedicated my life to training 4 or 5 days a week, nutrition, diet, but I wasn't balanced. I was always focusing on just slogging it out, and the love was going. And I realized that you couldn't really make a career out of athletics and actually make good money in Australia. So I got into the corporate world. I studied where I needed to, and I think that sort of set me up with discipline, being able to, have a structure, follow a structure, working as a team, but also the mindset, right? The resilience, the mind over matter. when you're in pain, you're persevering, pushing yourself. So I pride myself on that, and I think that really shaped me, and that's why I really invested a lot of time with my son, my 15-year-old. I've got a 15-year-old son as well as a 10-year-old. But my 15-year-old boy, he's got that mindset. He always wants to do the best he can do, but wants to compete all the time. It can be bad, it can be good, but I really wanted him to have that right, mentality that he needs to, put in the hard work, but also understand that success doesn't come overnight. It takes time, and there's these things where people talk about, you only fail until you lay down and don't actually get back up. That's the only time you actually fail. And it's about getting back up in life, in anything. You won't actually fail until you actually just give up completely. So, you can't call yourself a failure until, unless you give up. So if you keep getting up, you'll always be giving yourself a chance to win. So that's my mindset, and that's my journey when it comes to how I got to where I am now. So athletics didn't pay the bills, but accounting and software does pay the bills, and that's where I am today.
Yeah, and that's what the reason why they call it amateur sport.
It is an amateur sport, but it is something that I still do love. My back says no, but that's one of the big problems with running. I just can't handle the shock around my lower back, and it's just it's too painful for my back, to be honest. And I am getting older now, so there's a filter on right now, so I'm older than what people can see on screen.
I was going to say, and I can see where you got the discipline from. That's very important. And like you said, in nutrition, it's not just the athletic side. You also have to fuel yourself properly, and but that flows into what you're doing now, and that's why I asked the question. That's why I asked you about where you got that from. That's why, accountancy isn't. It's not exciting. It's, as a business owner, I've had to do it myself, so I understand it. I get it, and it's a job, but it's it's a I don't know if you know much about disc profiling, but if you're not a conservative, steady, or a conservative dominant, then you're going to find accounting a little 100%. Dull.
Exactly. You're going to feel like you're not really, you don't feel like you're living to your potential, right?
Exactly right. And when you said sales, you went from accounting to sales. I was like, what? Because they're the opposite.
Right? It's very bipolar. The opposite. Yeah, exactly. It's the polar opposites, and that's one thing that is quite what's the word, when you're the type of person, like people see that they like yourself, they get quite surprised by that. It's a big contrast. It's like a yin and yang as well. But I think that's how your life is. I think people go through different paths in life, and it is a journey. And I don't think you can say to yourself, this is the path that I'm going to go. Obviously, you have your dream, you have your goals, and it's all about, this is one thing that I did a lot in athletics as well as in my career, is setting up short-term goals. So the first 12 months, and then 3+ years long-term goals. It doesn't fit into that, in terms of planning your career goals, right? To switch between different career paths, but sometimes that's what happens, and life is unpredictable. Things change, and your vision changes, or you go down this pathway, and then opportunities open up. I was watching this YouTube video the other day, and we were talking about I don't know if you've heard of this YouTube creator. It's called Potassium, I think it's called, and they do all these sort of science-based research, but also like really good fact finding. And one thing they talked about was around how they did a survey, or there was a survey that was done around, I think it was 100 people, and it was a lifelong survey, like a research on people's lives, right? and it was spanning over like 40 years or something, right? It was a huge bit of data. And one thing
that's
they
a long
looked at
time.
was people's careers and where they went in terms of success, and how this group of people who became successful, who didn't. And a lot of the times, a lot of people believe that talent is actually what makes people become successful. Yes, it is one of the metrics or one of the key ingredients to becoming very successful, but a very strong, result, or from that lifelong survey, was from that group of people. It was actually that they were in the right place at the right time. That's how they actually leveled up in their career. And you can't measure that. You can't say, okay, well, obviously if you're giving yourself as many opportunities as you can and you're around the right people, but luck is something that you cannot, it's not something that's tangible. It just happens. So it's quite interesting. And I think, back to my story, I got that lucky break when I was working with the right person to then know someone that was looking for a salesperson, and she believed in me and she gave me the opportunity, and I took the opportunity. And that's how life can be sometimes. You can't plan it, and you just have to sort of just take your opportunities as they come.
Well, I think it's a great test. You got to try and find a new client, and you got to, would they give you 1 month? Was a 2-month window?
3 months. Yeah, it was 3 months,
Or
and I get a trip
3-month
to
window.
the UK. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you
I
trip.
like it.
Well,
It's sink or swim, right?
yeah, well, that's right. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, well, they obviously had confidence in you, or else they wouldn't have given you that challenge. And I mean, you're coming from a conservative
Yeah, risk
position,
averse.
and then
That's what accounting is. Risk averse.
you're getting thrown into an influencer position. So yeah, you're going to have to learn very, very quickly. But I mean, if they got the systems right in place, it makes your job a lot
Well,
easier.
they didn't at the time. There was a
Didn't
lot that
they?
was missing. So
Yeah,
it's
okay.
good and bad, right? If there's lots that's missing in terms of systems and processes, in terms of sales process, and marketing approach, then it's bad. But then it's good because, well, it's like, well, then I can build it out the way I want to. I can then be a key player around making sure that things are refined in terms of processes, and make sure that we're efficient and we hit the mark when it comes to lead gen, but also closing deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And marketing is very important as well. Without marketing, your sales go down. And
Yeah,
all the billionaires all say the same thing. Your marketing controls your business,
100%.
And then that leads to your sales. So that's very, very cool. So I'll I was going to ask you, um, it, the transition yourself. Did you find it tough, that 3-month period?
It was, you're learning a new business. That's always a challenge, but then you're also learning a new role. And I think one thing that I was lucky to have was someone that was willing to put in the time to mentor me. So I had a country manager that was really, she was hands-on, and she supported me as much as she could do, as with her limited knowledge, because she wasn't a salesperson. But it was also about me as learning as much as I could learn, to then take the burden off her, but also do my own self-learning. So I saw that as a good challenge. And me being me, I'm the type of person, could be autistic, I don't know, but I like to learn everything when I'm learning about a topic. So whatever it is in life, I've basically lived a life where if I like something or have an interest in something and I have a hobby in that, then I'll just research the crap out of it, and I'll join every forum, every Facebook group, and just feed information. So, for instance, I used to have a car make that I sort of just stumbled upon, a car I bought one day, and then I thought, okay, well, how can I improve it? And so then I ended up joining a Facebook group, got to know the owners, then ended up being part of the actual page, the admin of the whole page of something like 7,000 members. And I was running events with them, different track days and, talking about different things around how to fix the car and stuff, just learning about everything around that make and model. And that's how I like I like the challenge of learning. I find that there is no limit on how much you can learn in life. And that's important to me. And I think, I think we've all done this. I think maybe younger people don't do the same, but my dad was a mechanic, so obviously, he taught me to trade. We did lots of motor swaps and diff swaps and transmission swaps growing up on different cars. So one big important thing was always being able to work on your own car, and that's very important. I think to be able to check do the basics right. Check brake fluid, check brake wear, that type of thing. Change tyre. Lots of people don't know how to do that. Lots of people don't even know how to drive manual. So for me, it was always, once I had that sort of passion or that basic knowledge, then I grew into learning much more around that. And I think that's who I am. And I think, I think knowledge is power. That's one thing that my mum always used to say. Yeah, I mean, we've got AI, and I think one of the big things is, and obviously I work for a company that is strongly into the AI parts of technology. But I think one of the big problems with this future technology or this current technology is that it stops us from actually thinking. It makes us think that, or makes us not think about what. Obviously, there's a sense check around the data that we get from AI tools, but also it's that you're not actually thinking about how we should communicate. Like, you can have them write emails. Gemini will write an email for you, ChatGPT, they'll even do interviews for you, that type of thing. But it's stopping from people from actually learning about topics, collating or collecting information to be able to then be knowledgeable in an area, as opposed to using tools to rely on. So that's one thing I think is going to die out, as communication skills has died out, I think, as well, with Gen Y and Gen Z and that type of thing. So that's a big thing, I think, and I think face-to-face interaction is so important. And I think that is something that is sad. And that's why, I'm going down rabbit holes. That's why birth rates are declining around the world too.
Absolutely. In Japan, they've got a big problem. They're dying faster than they're reproducing.
They're like 40 years ahead of us. And the Western world has slowed down in population growth too. I think it's 1.3 children in Australia per person. So it's actually, per couple. I think it's actually crazy, and I think that's going to be a problem in the next year. I mean, I think I think the world in terms of population growth has been a problem, because it's not completely sustainable if there's too many humans in the world. So, the pollution and the environmental factors and stuff, and also the infrastructure can't support that. But I think in 30 years time, I think it's going to be a big problem. I think so there's pros and cons to it. But like the Japan is leading the way when it comes to that, and it's just to do with people just working too hard, not having time to actually have a social life. But they live a different culture than us. Work is about scaling the ranks in your career by longevity. So it's all about working in a company as long as you can, and then you also get recognition, but also you'll get the pay that goes with that, even though you might not contribute when you're old, but it gives you a hierarchy. But then also social media and technology is rampant there. They don't need people. There's AI girlfriends, there's rent-a-girlfriend, there's all these things, because people don't have the time. It's absolutely wild. But look at the way things are. There is AI everywhere around, people that can be created, and people don't want to deal with people. People don't like people anymore. They want what works for them, what makes them happy. And so I think that's going to be the next problem too, that we're not actually connected. We're not connected as is, right?
Absolutely.
That's a big thing. I know people that I try and make like, if you want to make a phone call, or I have conversations with them socially outside of maybe work or outside of online and that. And then they might get a phone call from a friend or from someone that they might be seeing, whatever it is, and they're like, "Oh, I'm not going to take this phone call. Why can't they just text me? Why can't they message me? I don't want to be on the phone." People don't want to even be on the phone these days. Our phones are designed to be for calling each other. They'd rather text. It's like, oh, okay. It's wild.
Yeah, well, yeah. What you just talked about is Mr. Gates. He did a TED talk about that. So it's all by design, brother. I was going to say, and yeah, you're right. Real estate in the Japan has basically plummeted.
Yeah.
Why? Because they just don't have the population to.
Yeah, I've heard that some schools have lots of schools in different country towns, villages. There's no students because there's no young people being born. Crazy.
Yeah, that's It's a first world country. Like, what the hell's going on? We've got problems here too. Don't worry about that. In 2000, there was 1 in 20 couples had problems with conceiving. Now it's 1 in 6, and that's from 2024. So, 24 years. Yes, it's gone from 1 in 20 couples. Now it's 1 to 6. 1 in 6. So yeah, we're not far behind.
We are.
I was going to say. I was going to say. I was going to ask you another question. But yeah, that other countries are suffering as well in a similar way. But I mean, you can't get real estate here. It's weird, isn't it? You can get it.
It's actually crazy. I looked at I think it was an Instagram post yesterday, and it talked about how our prices of everything, like it did a comparison. It was just a simple thing, right? Fuel, bread, house, income. And it compared us to Japan. And, Tokyo is a very expensive city, especially for real estate. But we, on average, we're 40% more expensive than them in every key aspect. Every metric that they had, we were 40% more expensive. And also, our salaries weren't much higher. I think it was only like maybe 20% higher compared to the Japanese salary or average salary. So I think the average was 60k Australian dollars for Japanese people versus us being 90,000 as a medium or average. So there is a bit of an increase, but then when it comes to the cost, a 20% increase in salary versus a 40% increase in cost, we're behind. So as an economy, which is crazy, right? We're an island with a small population compared to theirs in terms of size.
Yeah.
Something's wrong. Something's really wrong.
Absolutely. And what we were talking about before, that's what I wanted to ask you about is, you're talking about, looking up the car and you have to take care of things. But that's that you were in a rural area.
Yep.
Yeah. So
it's a given, right?
You don't come by things easily.
No. Yeah.
If you want to order parts for a car, for instance, you can't 24 hours.
My dad was machine parts himself. He had a lathe. He knew how to use metal and lathe and machine metal. And so you'd make stuff yourself. You jerry rig stuff too.
You had to. No one else was going to do it.
No, exactly.
Otherwise, you get to pay an arm and a leg for it.
That's right. Or you have to get it ordered and it takes forever to come in. But you need to drive. You need to get around because that's your source of transport. There's no Uber. None of that.
It still isn't.
No, there isn't. There wasn't even running water where we live, believe it or not. That might shock people.
Wow.
We didn't have any running water because we were that remote that we had to rely on tank water. That's how we used to flush the toilet. And if there's no rain, what happens then? There's no flushing of the toilet. Well, you got to buy it then. Exactly. And we used to buy it in drought. And if there was bushfires, that's another one as well. Then you'd have no electricity because then potentially the electricity lines would burn down too because everything was up in the air.
Yeah.
So then you have no electricity. So there's all these things, right? So, I really take my hat off to people that are living in remote areas of Australia. they live a hard life, and people don't realize that.
Well, yeah,
And
there's 80% of the Australian population live within a 50K
yep,
this distance from the coast.
yep.
So there's 20%. The other 20% lives inland.
Yeah, and you don't really know until you. And I think this is a good exercise for anyone. Go to, it doesn't have to be overseas, into a third world country. Just go to regional Australia. Go to a country town. It will shock you. It will shock you that, and especially cost of living these days as well. There's a lot of, it's not rampant poverty. I wouldn't call it that, but people are struggling. And I think the way of life is completely different than what city people experience. Yes, it's hard here as well, don't get me wrong, and people are struggling too. But I think the access to services and resources is much more limited.
Yeah, it's limited, very limited. Yeah, absolutely. I had to do an assignment on that, and yeah, I don't want to go into the numbers. It's not very good. But what was I going to say? Yeah, that when you talked about that, that's why I can understand what drove you, and that's why a lot of country, that's why some of the 20% come to the 80% because it is so tough. It's not easy. A lot of people do come to the cities because of that reason.
Yeah, the population is primarily Sydney and Melbourne. That's where people stay.
Yeah, Bris Vegas. Don't forget Brizzy, mate.
Bris Vegas, one of the high growth areas. It definitely is.
Absolutely, because you guys are all coming up north.
It is true. It is true. Everyone's going there. They know that there's something big happening. There's a big thing in 2032, and it's ramping up for that, I think, as well.
Yeah, since 2021, real estate in Brisbane's just gone crazy. Because a lot of people move to Brisbane because they realised if you're working in the office work positions, you don't have to go to the office.
Yeah,
you can do it from home.
Yeah.
So a lot of them said, "Well, stuff it. I'm going to go live the life." So they came up here.
I have a lot of customers and prospects that come from Brisbane area, and yeah, you're right. It's very it's a very big. Like a lot of Sydney folk are moving up there, and they're wanting a better life. They're wanting that sunshine. Apparently, it's been promised that there's more sun than Sydney, so that's why people move there. But then there's flooding that goes with it.
Yeah, that's right.
So pick your poison.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why they call us the River City, because we've got a big dirty river running through the middle of it.
I call it a big brown snake.
Yeah, that's right. It is, and guess what? It floods every 50 years. So,
I think the average has come down because there's been a few in the last 10 years.
Yeah, well, it flooded twice in 2010 and 2011. That's never ever happened.
Yeah, it was crazy. Flooding. It was huge.
It wasn't as bad as the 74 flood. It wasn't as bad as the 1893. I actually went to a pub yesterday and it had the markings on the wall.
The river. Yeah, where it peaked. Wow.
It's right on the pub's right on the river. So yeah. So I'll you've done well. We're up to over 50 minutes. So tell us. I'll just put up it's prospend.com. So tell us, who's the ideal client? Who do you want to help the most?
Yeah, for me, it's about obviously the right fit for the product, and the right fit means they need to have pain points. So there needs to be volume. Has any sort of software company or SaaS software company, like software as a service, is about subscriptions. So it's about recurring revenue each month, and it's about making sure that whoever comes in as a prospect has enough pain around transactions, so volume of transactions, to then warrant assist. So ideally, a customer would be around the 10 to $100 million mark in terms of annual turnover. They would then obviously need to have multiple staff that are either got company issued credit cards or doing staff reimbursement. So people out in the field, people that are, needing to travel for business, that type of thing, pay for things. But also potentially it could also be, lots of invoices. So if, they're a customer that has a lot of, paying on account for different services, then, there could potentially be lots of invoices. So a lot of schools use ProSpend. Funny enough, we also have KFC as one of our customers. So even enterprise businesses use ProSpend as well. Lots of companies that you don't know, like Anytime Fitness, they use ProSpend as well. They're going to have lots of sales reps and also different gym managers that go from site to site, different franchises and that type of thing. So where there's expense that needs to be captured, that's where there's pain, and it's just giving back time around that, as well as getting information data from the source to our platform. So ideally, like a 10 million and above, 50-man team and above, in terms of FTE, full-time equivalents, and then also any sort of vertical. It doesn't have to be service industry. It doesn't need to be NFP. It doesn't need to be education. It could be any sort of industry. And obviously, you have to also have the right people that believe in change. That's one of the biggest problems, especially when you're coming from a business that doesn't have any sort of software that automates the change management. Especially you've got, Beverly that's sitting in accounts, and she's been doing it for the last 20 years and processing stuff. She believes that she's done it for the last 20 years. It's going to be the same, and it's going to work. It's going to be fine. Having CFOs and business leaders in the business that actually believe that they can actually save time and money is a big component of that. The change management, and knowing that, yes, you have to put in training, the onboarding, but also committing to a project to make it successful is very important. Otherwise, people don't want to make that change because they see it as a risk, but also they don't want to invest the time to make the project successful. So having CFOs that are really digitally savvy and seeing that they need to improve their business apps and review their business apps often too, to get the best of breed products to work more seamlessly throughout the business. So that's one big thing too.
All right, brother. That's very good answer. And I'll move on to the last one. So what ideas or information would you give to provide lifelong longevity?
Yeah, for me, it would be, it's something that is, I would say there's a few points from that. I've written down a few here. There's probably 5 points I have around that I live by. So obviously we're middle-aged people. I'm not sure what the target audience is for your podcast, but I think really prioritizing your health early on in your life. I think that's been a big factor in my life journey, was having a father that really did teach me diets and key food groups, and for potential and also performance. So I think that's important. So looking after your health early on in your life, because people get to a point in their life where they're having health problems when they're in their 40s or even earlier these days, and they're like, well, the doctor said I need to do this, I need to take this medicine, or I need to do this, I need to start going to the gym and stuff. I think that's something that you need to invest in your life early on, to then not have problems later on. So training consistently, sleeping well, managing stress, that's a big thing. And that means, obviously having good work-life balance as well. The next thing I think is staying adaptable. So, as industries change and technologies change, life does change with that. So people that are successful and thrive are people that are willing to evolve and change their identities. And I think I'm testament to that as well, as things has happened, and technology has evolved, and I went into that space. Obviously, they always need accountants, but that's where there's a high growth area, I think, as well. I think the third point was around building discipline over motivation. So I think a lot of the times people think just being motivated to do something's enough. I think having discipline creates consistency, and then consistency creates the results. So it's about not getting success overnight. It's about turning up all the time, training all the time, but not just training all the time in the gym or running, whatever you're doing, but also building on that. Slowly you'll get better if you keep doing something. You remember when you first started driving all those years ago. We were tense wreck, right? We were tired from that drive the first time we drove when we were learning to drive. But now, we can have 3 Big Macs and a drink while we're there, and even a McFlurry at the same time when we're driving, right? So
Absolutely.
It's just about consistency, but also just just working hard on showing up all the time. So I think discipline is very important. And then the last one I think last two is protecting your mindset and relationships. So environment is very important, and I think this is something that I really talk to my kids about. The people around you really influence your journey in life. So there's this saying, right? You're in a group of 9 people, they all smoke, you'll become the 10th person. That's just the way it is. So I think that influences your energy, your standards, your direction, and the people, in your life and your journey in life and where you become and where you go to. So I think protect your mindset and the people that you're around, and make smart choices around the people you hang out with, and even in business as well, because that can give you opportunities and luck. The last thing is play the long game. Like I said, Rome wasn't built over in a day, right? It's not something that just happens. You have to have the discipline, you have to have the motivation, you have to have the consistency. So I think for longevity, I think you need to make sure that you are focusing on goal setting, short-term, long-term, but also, managing, their health is part of that. And I think that's more important than any of this, the health aspect, because if you don't have your health, you don't have any sort of wealth that comes with that. So I think, you have to be consistent, and that will beat any sort of intensity and any talents really. So play a long game and invest in your health, and everything will flow from that as well. So yeah, I think longevity, to wrap up from my end, longevity is having purpose. People that are willing to continuously grow, contribute, and challenge themselves day in, day out. And from that, they become mentally and emotionally alive for much longer. So I think, stimulating your brain through playing games. It might be stupid games, or it could be just watching documentaries, but also being active, going to gym, meeting up with people, friends. That gives you that social interaction. These things will give you longevity in the long run as well. Where you start, like there's a saying, right, in sport or in any sort of weightlifting gym, that type of thing. And my dad used to say is to use it or lose it. If you don't use it, your brain, your muscles, then you're going to lose it all. It's going to waste away. So get walking, get thinking. You'll live a long life from that.
My mentor at uni in my acupuncture degree, she used to say the same thing. If you don't use, you lose. So yeah, that's awesome, brother. That's a very comprehensive answer. I think it's the most comprehensive answer I've had so far. So thank you very much for that. And because you didn't bag me too much, I'm going to give you access to my health club. So I've got a health club. I teach about meditation, nutrition, exercise, EFT, emotional freedom technique, roadblocks in your mind, how to kick it to the curb, disc profiling, who you are, acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine. And also I teach about the 8 leading chronic diseases in Australia. And the numbers are getting worse every year. So thanks very much for that, brother. And my associate, she'll give you access to that, and also to the platforms that I've done this live on. And thank you so much, brother. I learned a lot from this conversation. Appreciate you coming on and give you some gold nuggets of information. And thank you very much for coming on, Dante.
Thank you, Scotty, as well. I appreciate the time and being on the podcast. And can't wait to access the club.
All right, guys, you should be watching the Get Busy Living podcast with Dante Meneguz. You have a great night, guys.